Yeah, so the four things, if you want to summarize this for Brazil, the government is too big and too corrupt, and getting bigger and more corrupt, unfortunately, as time goes on. I didn't put their exports up here. It's predictable from the yellow and the flag that one of their the number one exports, of course, is some kind of ore, metals. Then it's oil, meat, and sugar. They have a huge agricultural economy, so they export a lot of agricultural products. What companies, if you fly a lot, you may have flown on a jet made by Embraer. That's a Brazilian company. JBS is a meat company that bought Pilgrim's Pride chicken in the United States. My wife and I live in a suburb of Dallas where there's a steel plant owned by Gerdau, which is a Brazilian steel company. You may recognize those. You know, of course, they hosted the World Cup in 2014 and will host the Olympics in 2016. Economic freedom. Oh, I don't have time for the metaphor today, but one of the books I really enjoy is by a guy named Martin Gannon. He gives a metaphor for each country. And he said, if you can understand the samba, you can understand the culture of Brazil, because it's small step circularity, how things go in a small step around in a circle, meaning that's how we make progress, and physical touch. It's a very physical sort of country. But anyway, there's Brazil for you. Now let's go on to Argentina. History, culture, political system, religion, and the economy. There's Argentina for you and the Argentine flag. I should have asked this trivia first. Do you know how America got its name? Well, that's from that guy. Amerigo Vespucci was an Italian map maker and explorer, and he discovered Argentina in 1502. Got two continents named after himself. In 1816, they got independence from Spain. In the late 1800s, is one of the world's 10 richest nations, mostly because of mineral deposits. It's a rather sad story about how poor they are today relative to how rich they started. You know, in economics, we study what makes countries richer. People usually think it's resources, and it really is not the case. Argentina started as a resource-rich country, but because of their management of it, they're not nearly as rich today as they were in the late 1800s. In 1946, this guy took office, Juan Perón, and you may have heard of his wife, or you've seen the show about her. Her name was Eva Perón, and the show is called, Evita. And the current leader of Brazil sometimes has been compared to her. We'll talk about her in a minute. In 1982, with the Falklands War, and we'll visit the Falklands on this trip, they are a part of Great Britain. Argentina tried to take them over, and in the Falklands War of 1982, Margaret Thatcher and the Brits beat Argentina. 2002, there's an International Monetary Fund bailout because the country was doing so poorly. There's still repercussions from that. They're not doing much better today. Their population is 41 million. Okay, so to give you a comparison, we said Brazil is 200 million. The U.S. is about 315 million. Population 41 million. Argentina culture. All right, let's get across our spectrums. Now that we know how these flags go, we can just drop Argentina in there. It's going to be right in the middle. Not a huge difference in power distance. If you remember, Brazil was over here. Argentina, relatively the same as the U.S. and Japan. You won't notice that much difference. Collective and individual. Well, in this one, they line up exactly with Japan. Yes, they are more collective than the U.S., but then everybody is. And they're the same as Brazil. So they certainly think more as a collective. But again, the U.S. is the outlier here. Most countries are down around here. This is a normal number. Feminine or masculine, we've got our U.S. and Japan again. And we find Argentina not too much under the U.S. You'd sort of expect that to some extent, I suppose. Uncertainty, acceptance, and avoidance. We put the U.S. and Japan up there again, and Argentina lands up here. So this means that, is there a number? Yeah, there it is, 86. Again, they have a routine for doing things. So when you land in Argentina and get off the boat, you can expect that things will have a way of, there will be a way of doing things. There will be a certainty. And part of this goes to, I want you to see this difference between these three countries. You know, I said Brazil has a mixing of people. Argentina is 97% white. Yes, they all descended from Spanish and Italian, but they're 97%. You remember the number for Brazil? It was 57%, right? So this is a huge difference. This is a monolithic culture in Argentina. They're almost all exactly from the same culture. The economy is just terrible. Oh, the political system. Here we go. There's Cristina Kirchner. She's the president. She took over for her husband, Nestor Kirchner, when he died. They are a democratic republic, much like most developed countries, a bicameral system with 2 houses, Chamber of Deputies with 257, a Senate with 72 people. There's your President Kirchner. Constitution was from 1853. Oh, here's something interesting. I'm going to talk to you about 3 countries today, South America. They all have women presidents. Who knew? Right? Yeah. So my wife is going to wonder, Dave, why do you have all these pictures of good-looking South American president women on your desktop of your computer? Well, honey, I was just making the PowerPoint. Yeah, there you go. So we've got Dilma Rousseff so far, and now we've got Cristina Kirchner. They're 92% Roman Catholic. That's to be expected. But again, when you go around the world and look at these numbers, it's rather astounding. The 3 countries we're going to look at today, it doesn't astound you too much. It's not too surprising. The Argentine economy, the GDP is $734 billion. Again, comparatively, that's 3/4 of what the Texas GDP is. 26th largest GDP in the world. The GDP per person is 17,500. Okay, so this is a little above what we just saw in Brazil. It's going to be below what we're going to see in Chile. Growth is about 3% in 2013. This economy is really in serious trouble. The reason this says inflation 10% with an asterisk is Wall Street Journal reported just 2 weeks ago that they do control the inflation. The government tells you what it's going to be. So it's a 10% with an asterisk. Nobody knows what it is. It's much greater than that, but nobody really knows because they're not being honest about it, to tell you the truth. When you land in Argentina, you're going to get 8 pesos to the US dollar. All right, what about the economy? Economic freedom. I did a search for companies in Argentina. I told you about 3 of them in Brazil. There are no Forbes 2000 companies in Argentina. 0. None. None. Here's why. Because the economic freedom is just terrible. Of 177 countries, they rank 166. Okay, who's below them? Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea. They're not ahead of too many people. This is really, really, really terrible. This is really awful. As a matter of fact, in the 20 years that Heritage.org has been doing this, this is the 2nd worst falling of the index of any country in the world. In the last 20 years, their economic freedom has suffered more than only 1 country in the world. And you know who the other one is? Venezuela. So this is really bad economic freedom. Kirchner's taking them down a bad economic road. And here's the reason why. The rule of law, it's a very corrupt government. There are huge currency restrictions. An article in the Wall Street Journal just 2 months ago about how they have guards at the border so they don't allow people to take Argentine pesos out of the country. Government has actually seized some companies. In 2012, it seized a Spanish oil company that was operating there. Just nationalized it. Just one day said, it's now ours, 51%. Just took it over. Just took it over. Well, that's why there's no companies there from outside Argentina, because you run this risk that you're going to be nationalized. Government size is 35% of the economy. That's far too much. Debt is 45% of GDP, which again doesn't seem that bad. Regulatory efficiency is terrible. It takes 14 licenses to open a business. There are price controls on gasoline, water, and electricity. Because of this, their gas company can't make any money because they control the price. Yeah. Open markets, no, it's not an open market at all. Tariff rate's 5.6%. There's 40% of the banking is done by government banks. It's just highly, highly controlled. Article, let's see, I talked to you about their default in 2002. They sold some bonds in the U.S. market. They defaulted on those in August of 2014. And now there's a big articles in the Wall Street Journal about once every 10 days about President Kirchner wants to move those bonds to Argentina to get them paid off. The U.S. government's not allowing her to do so. So there's a huge case going on about whether they're going to pay those or not. So the economy is just really in a mess. Yeah, okay.